I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of Heart, Mind, and Purpose. In today's episode, we're diving into something that often gets oversimplified or politicized, the real differences between male and female brains. We'll talk about what science tells us, from hormones to how emotions are processed, and why it matters in the way children and adults think, feel, and behave. Before we jump in, I just want to say thank you for listening and supporting the show. Now here's your host, Dawn Hill.
So whether you felt misunderstood, misjudged, or just curious about what's going on behind the scenes in our beautiful, complex brains, stay with me. This episode is about honoring both the science and the nuance. Here's a quote from comedian Elaine Boosler. When women are depressed, they eat or go shopping. Men invade another country. It's a whole different way of thinking. We are designed differently and on purpose. You know, one of my favorite verses is in Genesis 1:27, and I love how the Message puts it. God created human beings in his own image. In God's image, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Isn't that beautiful? It's a reminder that is clear as day to me that both men and women reflect God's image. We are equally valuable, equally loved, but we are also uniquely designed. Now let me say this loud and clear. I'm not here to argue that one kind of brain is better than the other. This is not a competition. What I am saying is there are real, measurable differences between male and female brains. And there's a lot of research to back that up. Now here's one thing, acknowledging those differences isn't about creating division, enforcing stereotypes. It's about understanding each other better. It's about seeing how we think, how we feel, and how we relate to one another. Science has shown differences in anatomy, hormones, chemistry, and even physiology, all of which shape us, the way our brains process emotions, solve problems, and express behavior. And yes, there are exceptions, those rare people whose patterns don't quite fit the research. Think of it like this. Imagine a classroom where most students score between 80 and 90 on a test. Then one student scores 100 and another a 50. Those are the outliers. They don't fit the usual pattern, but they still matter. In fact, they can teach us something. A teacher in this situation is going to learn a lot from those test scores. So if you notice that you or someone you know seems to connect more with the other brain type in certain ways, that's okay. It's not wrong and it's not weird. It just means you're part of the beautiful variety that God built right into humanity. All right, let's dive in. We will start with the cerebral cortex. This part of your brain is basically the all-star player. It handles seeing, hearing, smelling, thinking, remembering, reasoning. It even helps you make moral decisions. It's where abstract thinking happens, designing, dreaming, setting goals, and finding motivation, and a whole lot more. I know that's already a lot, but wait, there is more. The cerebral cortex is split into two sides, the right and left hemispheres. Each one has its own specialties. I won't list them all here today. Those details will be in the handout on my webpage. But just know that they work together like a great team. And the reason they can work together is a structure that's called the corpus callosum, literally the colossus body. Picture it like a bridge made of nervous tissue, connecting the right and the left hemisphere of your brain. It has over 300 million fibers, and I just think that's phenomenal. That's so many. And it makes it like a lightning-fast monster data cable, letting both sides of your brain talk to each other and share information in real time. Now, here's a way to think of it, or a way I like to picture it. So if you imagine your brain has two radios. One radio is tuned to logic, and the other one's tuned to emotion. For women, those radios are often connected with a strong, clear signal. They can pick up both stations at the same time and respond from both. For men, the signal is often more a single channel. It's strong, but tuned to one side at a time. And hormones play a big role in this difference. For men, the higher testosterone levels tend to make the corpus callosum smaller in size. This promotes growth in the brain's spatial reasoning centers. It encourages focus and goal-driven behavior. It is often linked with risk-taking, competition, and single-task attention. For women, higher estrogen levels encourage more connections to grow between the left and the right hemispheres, which makes the corpus callosum thicker. This means stronger subconscious processing power, better communication between different ways of thinking, and often greater intuition, nurturing, and the ability to read people. On average, female brains show more integrated communication between hemispheres, while male brains show more specialized and compartmentalized activity. The key takeaway here is both have strengths, and as I like to say, different does not mean better or worse, just different. We are each wired with our own specialties, and that's part of the beauty of how we were made. Now, because I'm a visual person, I'd like to give you sort of my visual, how I picture a his brain versus a her brain. And if you've ever seen the movie by Steven Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you remember the last scene, or if you didn't see the movie, this is what happens in the last scene. There's the Ark of the Covenant. It's placed in a wooden crate. It is sealed and stamped property of the U.S. government. A forklift comes in and picks up the crate, and the forklift driver begins to drive down this big warehouse. The camera pans back. We see how big the warehouse is, and you can still see the forklift driver moving, and the camera pans back again, and now that forklift and its driver are much smaller, and this warehouse is massive. Because in his brain, it's more like a warehouse. There are rows and shelves. All the problems and all the solutions to any one problem go in a box. They're placed on a shelf, on a row. And what Spielberg doesn't show is that the largest thing in the warehouse is the nothing box. And it's huge. And so his brains want to put all the stuff on the shelves until they're needed. And they like to spend the rest of the time in the nothing box where it is calm, that it's stress-free, and they can unwind and relax. Now, for her brains, it's more like the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy has been hit on the head. She wakes up to look out the window that's not there any longer to see she's in the middle of a tornado because there goes a tumbleweed and a screen door and a tree and a neighbor and a bike and another tumbleweed and more debris, and it just keeps spinning. This is more like a her brain. We have this constant motion. Both hemispheres are speaking to each other because of this thick corpus callosum. So in my brain, I visualize that like that tornado. We're constantly juggling the schedules of our life, whether we're married or single, with children or not. There's lots of schedules, there's lots of things, and there's all the fun stuff as well. And so we don't have a nothing box. Believe me, I've tried really hard to construct one. I have not been successful yet. I think the closest her brains get to a nothing box is, well, TV. We can be watching that, and it doesn't seem to spin as much or as loudly. I think her brains would love a nothing box, and I do have to say, they'll never let us, those his brains, they'll never let us in their nothing box because they know, well, we'll try to hang up curtains or put a chair in there, and they want nothing in there. They're just different. It's how our brains are different. So I hope that picture or picturing those two differences helps you see that there are similarities, but there are big differences. All right, let's take a quick look at our vision because, yes, there are a few differences between male and female brains here too. Inside our eyes, we've got two main types of light-sensitive cells, rods and cones. Rods are more like motion detectors. They're super sensitive to light and movement, especially in low light. And they hang out in the edges of our eyes or the edges of our vision, the peripheral vision. Cones, on the other hand, are detailed specialists. They handle color, fine detail, and they work best in bright light, right in the center of our vision. Now here's where it gets interesting. For women, research shows they tend to have wider peripheral vision than men. That might be because of higher rod activity or a naturally broader scanning ability. Some evolutionary psychologists think this may have evolved for many things like gathering food, keeping an eye on the children, reading social situations, or spotting danger before it gets too close. For men, they often show stronger depth perception, better motor detection, and sharper long-distance focus. This lines up with the old hunter role, tracking prey far away, throwing a spear, or aiming a projectile. Men tend to rely more on central vision, basically more tunnel vision, but in a very good way. Here's a real-world example of how the difference can play out. In many countries, including the U.S., more young boys are struck by cars than girls. Why? Boys are more often physically active and take more risks outdoors, meaning they are nearer streets or traffic more often. They are more likely to dart into the street or misjudge a car's speed. And sometimes society just gives boys more freedom to roam, which increases their exposure. So if you can picture a field where kids are playing ball and there's cars parked on the side and then there's a street, say a ball gets kicked off the field and into the street. A little boy is more likely to be honed in on the ball and following it and just dart between cars and land in the street and possibly get hit by a car. Where if a little girl is chasing the ball, she's honed in on it as well, but as she gets closer to the street, she's going to see something moving in her peripheral vision, which is more likely to cause her to stop and check out, is that danger or can I keep going after the ball? And that's just what research shows. It's not because little boys are bad and little girls are good. It's just a difference in how our visions work. So here's the takeaway. Men and women often see the world differently, literally. Women's wider peripheral vision is like having a built-in panoramic camera, perfect for scanning the environment. Men's stronger central vision is like having zoom lenses, perfect for spotting something far away and locking in on it. Neither is better. They are just different tools for different kinds of tasks. So I have this cartoon in my head about that, and it's like cave people. So the cavemen are all coming out of the cave, and everybody's got their club, and they're in a line. They're going out to hunt for dinner. And then the women are gathering the children with baskets, and they go into the jungle, and the kids are playing as they will, and the women are foraging for berries, and they're socializing. In the meantime, they have this great peripheral vision that can see if danger is coming and gather everyone together and get to safety. Let's talk about how men and women often listen differently. I want to be clear right up front. These are general patterns and not hard, fast rules. They're shaped partly by culture, partly by biology, and of course, individuals vary a lot. So here's the gist. Women often listen for connection and emotion. You'll hear them offer little verbal cues like, I see, to let you know they're right there with you. They tend to ask questions that go deeper into feelings like, how did that make you feel? And they often put empathy and understanding at the top of the list. While men, on the other hand, often listen for information or solutions. They may stay quieter while you talk, not because they're not engaged, but because they are processing. Their questions tend to be practical, like, what did you do about it? And they usually prioritize problem solving and clarity. Neither way is better. They are just different gears, and knowing the gear you are in or the person you're talking to is in can make a big difference in how you connect. So his brain, her brain is a concept I got from a book called His Brain, Her Brain, and it is written by Dr. Walt Larimore and his wife, Barb. And I've adapted some of that information in the podcast. But they have an example that is very good, I think, about listening, and it goes something like this. So there are 3 children, and it's after school, and a mom is cooking dinner, and one kid is playing piano, and one is watching TV, and the other one is doing homework at the table. The phone rings, and she walks right over to it and picks it up and answers it. The same scenario, but it's the dad. One kid's playing piano, one's watching TV, and the other's doing homework. There are pots and pans on the stove because he's cooking dinner, and the phone rings. He turns the stove off. He says, turn off the TV, stop playing piano, and put your pencil down. And then he answers it. And that's just an example I thought was very good, a good visual of how men and women listen differently. So here's a little toolbox analogy regarding hormones. Now imagine this. If estrogen is the one stocking the toolbox, which is more common in female brains, it often fills it with connectors, tools for communication, multitasking, emotional processing, and social sensitivities. Think like empathy gauges, quick access, multi-tools for juggling a lot at one time. We're back to the tornado. Those little sensors can pick up on tone, body language, and facial expressions. Now, testosterone, on the other hand, more common in male brains, tends to load the toolbox with precision tools, focus drills, spatial rulers, and risk calculators. These brains are often wired to solve one big problem at a time, tune out distractions, and go deep, really deep, into the task at hand. Here's the important part. Both toolboxes are valuable. In fact, we all carry some tools from each set, just in different proportions. And just like real life, the tools you reach for most often depend on the situation you're in. So when you're in a relationship or working with someone and they seem to think differently, it might not be personal. It might just be a different set of tools at work. And once we see that, we can start trading frustration for curiosity and conflict for connection. So I have a little imaginary conversation that I may have had several times in the early years of dating my husband and the early years of marriage. And I know, or maybe I guess, that many of you may have had this conversation or something very similar to it. So I'm going to play both roles, male and female. And there's a boy and a girl, and they're dating. They're sitting on a porch swing, and it's a lovely night. And everything's going great, and it's pretty quiet. They're just sitting there holding hands. And she says, "What you thinking, honey?" And he says, "Nothing." And now she sits up a little straighter, less relaxed, and says, "No, what are you thinking?" And he sits up a little straighter, a little more tense, and says, "Nothing." And then it gets quiet, and the tension builds, and she's thinking in her head, "Why won't he tell me what he's thinking? Nobody can think nothing." And so she says, "Why won't you tell me what you're thinking? Nobody can think nothing." Well, he's sitting up straight now, and he's like, I'm thinking nothing. I can think nothing. And that's what I was thinking. Now I'm thinking, why are we talking about this? And it gets quiet again, and the tension builds. And she says something like, "When you first loved me, you'd tell me what you were thinking. Why won't you tell me what you're thinking? Don't you love me anymore?" And he's sitting over there inside of his head thinking, I wish I was in my nothing box. But then he's thinking, I don't have any tools for this. Where's the tool for this? This seems crazy. I told her nothing, but she doesn't believe me. And he says, I don't know what to tell you. I'm thinking nothing. Why don't you understand that I'm thinking nothing? Maybe some of you have never had that conversation or something like it. But very often in the work I do, that's very much a base kind of understanding. Her brains and his brains function as their brains would have them. And if you don't know that our brains are different or have different specialties or function in different ways, like listening or seeing or paying attention to which details, then we're likely to have big miscommunications that can really be reduced or even eradicated if we understood he has a nothing box and he understood she doesn't understand that because she's just got a tornado over there. We're just different. Not one is better than the other. So thank you so much for joining me today on Heart, Mind, and Purpose. If there's one takeaway, it is this. Real biological differences between male and female brains do exist. They shape how we feel, think, and interact. But within every pattern, there are always exceptions. One type of brain is not better or less than the other. They are different and have different specialties. They are equal in value. Next time, we will talk more about how his brain, her brain differences impact other areas of our lives. If today's episode sparked thoughts, questions, or even a little aha, I'd love to hear from you. And maybe if you'd like to share this episode with a friend you think might enjoy it, then please do so. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for tuning in to Heart, Mind, and Purpose with Dawn Hill. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a review to help others find us. You can learn more about the show by visiting dawnmariehill.com and click on the tab that says Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.